So there's this guy in British Columbia named Arthur Topham. I know about him because he keeps sending me irritating emails anti-Israel. I'd call him anti-Semitic, but who cares? I get 100 spam emails a day. Well, guess what happened? The police charged him with a crime for his blog. I'd call Arthur Topham offensive, but the cops are calling him a criminal. Joining us now via Skype from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan is his lawyer and free speech fighter, Doug Christie. Hey, Doug, welcome back to the show.
Great to talk to you. I'm really glad to be able to discuss this issue.
Listen, I don't care much for Arthur Topham. He's anti-Zionist. I think that's code for anti-Semitic, but I don't give a damn. I don't care if he's a Holocaust denier. I think you ought to be able to have incorrect opinions. I think you ought to be able to have offensive opinions. How the hell did we come to the state in this country where you can be charged with a crime for saying something people don't like?
Well, exactly. Rowan Atkinson recently published a video, which is on YouTube, a brilliant speech about the same type of law in England called Section 5 of the Public Order Act. I really couldn't improve on what he had to say, because certainly the prominent and the privileged will never be charged. It's the basically marginalized people who will be charged, and certainly if everybody who was offensive was a criminal, I mean, at various times, who wouldn't be?
Yeah, well, half of Parliament says things that I don't like much. I mean, the actual wording of the law is hate speech. Am I right? I mean, listen, hate is a human emotion, and there is no human around, unless they have a personality disorder, that never feels hate sometimes. Liberals hate Tories, Democrats hate Republicans, Flames fans hate Oiler fans. I mean, there's hate for everything. Sometimes hate is rooted in a real cause of grievance, but as long as you don't incite actual acts of violence, what's wrong with having some guy spout off on the internet?
Well, exactly. If love is legitimate, which of course it is, so should hate for inappropriate circumstances. And who's to say what's appropriate? I mean, ultimately, if it's the government, we all know that it'll just be what's basically popular. So free speech will be meaningless because you can say whatever's popular, and then the minute you don't, you have an opinion that others don't like, well, then suddenly you'll be a criminal. And that, to my mind, is the essential problem with this law. It's entirely subjective, and it's extremely dangerous because it just basically criminalizes the unpopular.
We're showing some things on the screen from his website, Radical Press. I disagree with them. I find them gross. I find some of his comments repulsive. Big deal. I don't open his emails. I don't choose to surf to his website to be offended. I mean, seriously, you have to choose to go there if you're offended. I got a question for you, Doug. The last time I remember this hate crime being prosecuted in a court was the case of David Aheneke, who's now deceased. He was an Indian chief in Saskatchewan who made some off-the-cuff remarks at some convention about Hitler. I don't even care what the remarks were. He went to trial, and then on appeal, he was acquitted. Were you the lawyer in that case too, Doug?
Yeah, we went through two trials. We had the first trial. He was convicted. I appealed, and we won the appeal, and then they appealed to the Court of Appeal of Saskatchewan, and we won there. Then we went back, we went through a new trial, and I think basically the stress of those two trials contributed an awful lot to the death of David Aheneke. In a sense, in a way, it was a death sentence or a death trial, and ultimately he was acquitted. And I can understand why people would find some of what he said offensive, and I think he probably would have, had he more time to think about it, would have said things differently. But, we make mistakes when we speak.
But let me ask you this, Doug. Look, I mean, I don't care if he made a mistake. I mean, I think we ought to be able to make mistakes. I don't care if he could have said things better. I don't care. I don't care. I'm sure that Arthur Topham is motivated by a form of malice. I don't give a damn. I think in Canada you should be able to be mean and mad as long as you don't actually hurt anyone. I want to ask you this. You won the trial. You won the appeal for Aheneke. Why are we still prosecuting when the Court of Appeal is throwing this out? What political decision was made to go after Topham? I mean, why would they do that? I see hate everywhere in Canada, especially in BC. It comes from extremist radical imams like Eunice Kathrada, who calls Jews pigs and dogs. Why do we go after harmless white bloggers instead of massive Iranian-sponsored hate rallies in Toronto?
Well, probably for political reasons, and that's the sad part about this particular charge. It enables the Attorney General, who has to consent personally to these prosecutions, to decide, what's politically convenient here. And the Attorney General doesn't have to give reasons. If they find that prosecuting an MM for saying something inappropriate would be dangerous politically, they don't have to do it. But of course, a guy like Arthur Topham in the middle of the wilderness near Quesnel, he's not likely to have any public support. He's not likely to have much of a support network, and it becomes rather expedient to prosecute that person.
You know, he's a nobody who's about to be turned into a famous somebody by those idiots. I think he's going to win his case, by the way. I think he's going to be acquitted. It wouldn't surprise me if the law was struck down as unconstitutional one day. But in the meantime, the government's going to make him famous. Last question for you, Doug, and we're going to have you on the show again. I want to follow this case. I hate Arthur Topham. Look, I said the word hate. I hate him. I think he's an idiot, but I think we ought to be allowed to be idiots in Canada. Even anti-Semitic idiots like him have the right. Question for you, Doug. Do you expect any help from left-leaning civil liberties groups like the BC Civil Liberties Association, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association? Will they come and help you? They disagree with Arthur Topham just as much as I do. Will they help you in court?
They've never come to the defense of these so-called anti-Semitic hate-mongers that I'm aware of. It's, to my mind, rather unlikely, and he certainly has no funds to defend himself, so I think that might be part of why he's an easy target.
Huh. Well, we'll have to ask the Civil Liberties Association if free speech only applies to G8 and G20 leftist protesters or if it applies to right-wing wackos like Topham, too. Hey, Doug, thanks for coming on the show today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Hey, coming up, fighting the bag-banning bigots in Toronto.